Gents, I just want to pause the episode for a moment to let you know about the Strong Men of Value Academy. You will have heard me refer to it a number of times, and I want to bring more attention to it. So this isn't just a program, it's a life-changing environment and community of men who are focused on personal and professional growth. We're looking at areas of relationships, wealth, and health, things to help you thrive and maximize your life. Imagine having bi-monthly one-on-one coaching sessions with myself, weekly group coaching calls, and an incredible brotherhood of high achievers by your side. Now we're diving into resilience, leadership, and holistic growth to not just succeed in your career, but to thrive in your health and your relationships. Your journey to greatness, it starts here. So join the movement and you can apply for the Strong Men of Value Academy. You can head to themanthatcanproject.com to find out more. Episode 410. Now you've probably experienced people that you just met and instantly you feel like your best mates. Then on the flip side, you have those people in your life that you're like, fuck, I never really have much in common with them, but you keep that relationship there, well, because it's stood the test of time so far. Today's guest, Renee Brown from Renee Louise Psychology, comes on the show and we speak about values-based living. Now, what I was talking about before, it sort of aligns with your values, and when you're aware of what your values are, it makes it easier for you to make decisions around where you want to spend your time, with who you want to spend your time, because quite often deep in your stomach there's that feeling when you're in the right place. So values-based living is a great topic that we discuss today. We also speak about, and this is a big one for relationships, but attachment styles in relationships, the different types, how to identify yours and your partner's, and learn how to work together based on the attachment style. So we're going to get in depth there, which is awesome. So before we dive into today's episode, I do want to say two things. One, this is not to be used as medical advice. This is a conversation between myself and Renee, and if any of it piques your interest or resonates with you, go see a psychologist. Go seek professional help if you want to go explore those further. Secondly, Smov Academy. We are rolling. If you're ready to figure out what that goal is, right? Create more clarity around who you are as an individual, be able to break that down into goals, create a plan to work towards it, and be held accountable to working those goals daily, apply for the Academy. We will help you get there. It's an incredible community of men from all around the world who are absolutely crushing it in their chosen field. So definitely get amongst that. You can head to themanthatcanproject.com/strong men of value and hit the application link there. I look forward to seeing you guys in the Academy. If you like this episode, share it, leave a review. That's enough from me. Let's dive into today's episode. The Man That Can Project podcast, a podcast empowering career-driven men to live more fulfilling lives. We are here to challenge your beliefs, redefine success, and talk about the important stuff in a relatable way. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. My name's Lachie Stuart. Let's get into it. Renee, thanks so much for giving up your Friday afternoon to jump on here. Very, very excited to have a conversation. So you're a clinical psychologist?
So I'm a general psychologist, but doing my clinical psychology registrar program.
So what's the difference between general and clinical?
Yeah, so I guess it's in the training. So a clinical psychologist will either have a master's or doctorate in clinical psychology. So I've done my master's in clinical psychology. But after that initial training, we have to be registered first as a general psych, and then we do 2 years of practice where we have to do additional professional development and supervision. And then at the end of that period of time, we're then registered as a clinical psych. So it's just a little bit extra training.
Yeah, that's cool. How are you finding it so far going through that on your way to the clinical part of it?
Yeah, really good. Really enjoying the professional development. So the learning just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
You carry on with the learning. But it's great because in the master's program, you kind of learn about everything, right? But then when we go into our careers and do our professional development, we can kind of hone our skills and do additional training in what we're particularly interested in.
Yep.
So it's nice to learn more about what I'm interested in.
Yeah, definitely. What's that field for you that you're interested in?
Trauma.
Straight to the heavy stuff. What drew you to the trauma space?
I think it was just exposure to a population of people quite early on in my career who had experienced quite significant trauma.
Yep.
And just being able to connect with those people and have them, I guess, really trust me with their trauma.
Yep.
It's a really special thing.
You know, we're getting a fire alarm today here on the podcast. How exciting. Perfect.
Good timing.
Cool. Carry on. I was like waiting for an alarm and there's no alarm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. The perks of doing a podcast in the home studio. Sorry, yeah. So with the exposure to people with trauma, how common is it for people to, like, does everyone have trauma? Or
Well, I guess everyone has their own trauma.
Yep.
Right. So obviously there's degrees of trauma, but that's quite subjective.
Yep.
But, you know, research shows like 1 out of 3 people have experienced a trauma in the last few years.
Wow.
And there we go.
There we go. We got it. We got the This is the first time on the podcast. I like it. Cool. 1 in 3 people.
Yeah. Yeah. So like a lot of people have experienced
Yep.
trauma, and I guess, you know, in society today, we recognize trauma more than ever before. And a lot of people have suffered from abuse and neglect, including like emotional neglect. So there are a lot of people out there who have suffered from trauma. And some people don't even realize that they've suffered from trauma.
Yeah, because we seem to be good at like burying stuff and moving on with our life, especially if it happened in the earlier years of our life.
Yeah, yeah.
Does the stuff that we bury still sort of fester and impact us as we get older?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
What's I guess majority of our audience is men, but is there any sort of things that you see commonly occurring in regards to trauma for men?
I do. So something that I've noticed is that I guess particularly with what we call like emotional deprivation, so not having had our emotional needs met early on in life, ways of coping with that and responding to that are not then being able to express ourselves emotionally. And I see that a lot with men, not being able to identify and express their emotional needs.
Does that come from like the craving of wanting your dad's attention from a young age? And I think even from a lot of men that I've spoken to, working class families and stuff like that, generally back in the day, your dad's the one who's working, then he comes home and the last thing he wants to do is generally play with his children, not because, you know, he didn't love us or love his children, but you're knackered at the end of the day and didn't have that awareness around that. And I just know for me personally, I was like, that's what I always wanted. It's like the dad's approval.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess there's quite a generational difference.
Yep.
So like people who are say 30 and older, their parents may have had not as much of an environment that was emotionally supportive.
Yeah.
So, you know, we see like harsher punishments provided from those kind of generations.
The old wooden spoon and stuff like that a bit more.
Yeah, and I guess the gender differences between men and women and the way they were treated was quite different.
Yep.
You know, boys were like, be strong and tough it out.
Yep.
And that teaches little boys to, I guess, try to put that persona on, and it doesn't create a safe environment to express emotion.
So how can like, how do you find that men go through sort of breaking that down? Because there are, I've been through that sort of experience, and one of the things I know a lot of men are really wanting to improve is their emotional regulation and being able to, vulnerable's the word at the moment, but really start to express themselves and be able to feel all the emotions that go through. Is there sort of a loose and just everyone, this is not going to be advice for anyone specific. We're just having a conversation. If any of this feels like it would be beneficial, go see professional help. Disclaimer in there. Good. Sorry.
Yeah, so I guess the first stage is usually building insight into one's own emotions, and that can be achieved through taking the time to really reflect on how you're feeling. So having that space to connect with your body and identify physical sensations that might be cues to emotions that haven't been listened to. Tuning in and seeing what you are feeling. What are you thinking? What situations have there been that may be impacting what you're feeling and what you're thinking? It might sound quite simple, but that's where it starts, is actually listening to yourself, because you can't communicate how you're feeling if you're not first identifying what you're feeling, what you're thinking, how that's expressing in your body. Yeah. So that builds insight over time.
As you said, it sounds very simple. I know for myself, I was met with a heap of resistance around, like, this is girly. I don't want to sit down and think about my emotions. And I think part of that blockage was also, it was scary. It was foreign, and I didn't, as we were talking about, there was that part of me that had built up this brick wall. I know a lot of men are in that position where to sort of slowly peel back the layers and go, this is who I really am, and so almost getting to know yourself again. It's so fucking daunting. But to get to where we're all, to have a better quality of life, whether it's relationships, love, business even, like that's part of that process. So it is simple, but guaranteed you're probably going to be met with some kind of resistance.
Absolutely. And everyone's at a different point in their own journey. So for some people, tuning in and identifying those emotions is really daunting. For some people, tuning in and identifying their thoughts is really daunting. But a good place to start is physical sensations. So tuning in, is my heart beating a little bit faster today? Am I feeling tension in my body? Do I feel some tightness in my throat, in my chest? These kind of physical sensations can be cues to emotions that we're maybe not connected to quite so well. So tuning into those physical sensations is a nice start.
Yeah, it's a cool little tip. I've never used to think about that. I was just like, I'm either nervous or I'm anxious. That was it. And you sort of try and brush past that and distract yourself. So being able to really slow down. Do you feel journaling something that I do, and sort of liken that to how I feel? And also meditation, I go through sort of bouts where I get all into it, but it's now a lot of the stuff that I do is like breath practices and stuff like that, but really tuning into seeing why I feel certain ways and what's sort of missing in my life, which is a good process for me. I still got a lot of shit to work on though, don't get me wrong, but it's all part and parcel of it. So I guess that sort of ties into a few other things to jump into, but like we'll start at values-based living. It's values for a lot of the people I follow on social media. Values is a big thing, and I guess learning how to live that from your life. So I guess reflecting on the values across different domains of your life. Firstly, what is the values-based living, I guess, idea or concept, and how do you implement that into your life?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of us, we can be quite goals-driven, right? So you set some goals, you work tirelessly towards those goals, and then you meet them, and then it's like, oh, okay, next.
That's it, yeah.
And then you move on to the next one. And sometimes we can even think, oh, when I meet this goal, then I'll be happy, satisfied, whatever it is. But for anyone who lives like that, if you reflect back on goals that you've already met, is that what really happened? And oftentimes it's not. We just move on to the next goal. And that can just keep happening throughout life. So values-based living is connecting to the why. Why is this particular goal important? So we can think of it like a goal is like a destination.
Yep. But
the value is the direction, the compass. It's the north, it's the south, east or west. Yep. It's the direction that there's no end point. We keep working towards that because it has so much meaning for us. When we can identify what we really value, there's a lot of intrinsic motivation in that. So motivation that comes from within us as opposed to some kind of external reward. It has that drive. We have that drive to always work towards that value. And it's fulfilling. It's meaningful when we're working towards that value. We can then look at goals from a values-based perspective and break it down into like mini goals. You know, it becomes more about the process as opposed to the end.
Destination. How do people go about finding their goals? Because I feel like especially over the last couple of weeks, the most common response I get to blokes is, I don't know where I want to go and what if I make the wrong decision?
Yeah.
So for the men sitting in that sort of position, how do they go about piecing that together?
Yeah, so doing some reflective exercises can be helpful to start to untangle what really matters to us. So these exercises could look like at your whatever next big birthday you have, 30th, 40th, 50th, 60th. If you kind of imagine yourself there and you imagine everyone in your life who really matters to you there, and one of the most important people in your life is making a speech about you and describing you as a person, what would you want them to say?
It's pretty deep when you think about that.
Yeah. I mean, another way to do it is like, what would you want someone to say at your funeral? So, you know, that can be quite hard for some people to think about, but, you know, we're all going to end up there. And what would we want someone to say about us? What would we want our legacy to be? And that can really speak to our values. We could even think about if you could write a letter to a younger version of yourself or an older version of yourself. What would you want to say to that younger version of yourself? And the things that you would change usually also speaks to your values. It indicates what maybe you weren't doing according to your values.
That's cool. It's an exciting thing to do, and as you said, it can be daunting. Like if you go to that, if people were speaking at your funeral, but we're guaranteed we're going to get there. Like that's coming. So the time or the journey between that is what we get to be in control of.
Yes.
And taking one of the things that keeps really showing up from what you've said so far is like reflection. A lot of the answers to us having a better quality of life is already within us. We just need to listen and spend that time to do so.
Absolutely. So we all have our own journey, and like as a psychologist, I don't provide people with answers. I just kind of, put them on the path so that they can find it within themselves. Values, a lot of reflection. Usually we have an idea, and there's certainly things that we all value to a degree, right? Like things like kindness is important to most people, but when we're tapping into our true values, we really feel it, right?
Yep.
Like for me, a sense of adventure is really important.
Yep.
Like I live for that,
yep.
Breathe for that. And that's what a value feels like. And then we can start to differentiate into different domains of life. So what's really important in a work or educational capacity? What's really important in relationships? And that can then be divided into family, intimate relationships, friendships.
Yep.
What's important in terms of personal growth, health.
And yeah, definitely.
And then leisure as well. What's important for us to recharge?
It's so cool because we use the we've got this 8 areas all men must master. And I say must master because it's actually taking the time to think about what you value and what's really important to you in those areas and how can you improve upon them. And it's not just always saying, I'll never be able to get a 6-pack. It's like, well, what would you need to learn? Is it about nutrition, recovery, movement? Relationships is one of the most important things for a lot of blokes, right? We sort of crumble when we lose a relationship, and it's the second biggest reason why we take our own lives by suicide. And so learning things like how do I communicate, how do I express, what's really going on for me. All of these things are little, I guess, skills that we can develop in those areas to really prove that we value whatever it's sort of diving into. And I think often we also don't realize that a lot of these skills or values are transferable into other areas of our life. So if you're improving your communication with your partner, it's going to impact your work, or it's going to impact your time with your mates as well, because it's a skill and it's like building a muscle. The more you flex it, the better it gets.
Absolutely.
And the bigger it gets as well, which is cool. And also you're going back to, you mentioned before, intrinsic motivation. It's like when you know why you're doing it, it's a lot easier for you to remain consistent throughout it. Just quickly, while we're back on intrinsic motivation, do you think it's important, like extrinsic motivation still valuable for us as people as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be a balance. So if we think of work, for example, an extrinsic motivator is what you get paid.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
It's a reward for the hard work that you do. And without that, like that's an important motivator and it's very relevant. But we also need to have that intrinsic motivation as well. Why are we doing the work that we're doing? Why does it matter to us? So both are important and need to be in a balance.
Yeah. You just can sort of lean on one or the other as you're moving through that. That's brilliant. What of then living by your values daily? Like how do you sort of implement that? Because I mentioned 8 areas, but you also mentioned multiple areas of your life. Like how do people, I guess, even put on different hats to prioritize that? Because it can be very easy. I'll put my hand up for this, like to just go work's my main focus and you forget about so many other things in your life.
So identifying what really matters in the different areas of life is, I guess, that first step. And also reflecting on where you're at in terms of how much are you living according to your values in those different areas of life. And, this is drawn a lot from a therapeutic approach called acceptance and commitment therapy. And part of that is really reflecting on your values. So within that, we look at how much are you living according to your values. So, for example, for me, my sense of adventure is not like, I guess it's a little bit relevant in the workspace, but that's more like my leisure time, right?
Yep.
How much am I living according to that value at this point in time? And if one identifies that, I'm actually not living according to that value, simply noticing that can be motivation within itself to then start to make some changes in the personal life. Yep. But we can start to sprinkle our values into everyday life. So, for example, if you identify that being really independent is a really important value, you can sprinkle that into all different areas of your life. So at work, for example, if it is feeling like a real slog and you just don't want to be there, simply reminding yourself that being here allows me to be independent. It's allowing me to be the person that I want to be. Yep. Just that reminder can act as a bit of a motivator to then get through that slog.
So continuing to check back in on the why really is important.
Yeah.
Reflection is just the key, the absolute key. I guess why we're sort of in this being reflective and mindfulness, almost like present moment awareness. what is it and what's like the science behind mindfulness? Because mindfulness is definitely a buzzword, and I feel when I got into mindfulness, once again, I thought it was for like a specific kind of person, and it was not something that I did coming from a rugby background, but it's been game-changing for me.
Yeah, so many of us live in the future or in the past. We're thinking about what's coming next or what's happened. So present moment awareness is about bringing yourself back into the now and living in the present moment. I mean, how often do we zone out of conversations, drifting off into thought, and we miss what someone important to us has said? Or maybe we're somewhere really beautiful, but we're thinking about something that happened last week and we can't even see what's in front of us. So bringing ourselves back into the present moment, this is a really important way of living for a lot of people, and it's really important for people who do experience things like depression and anxiety, because often they are in their thoughts in the future and in the past. So mindfulness practice, it is a buzzword, and it's, you know, kind of everywhere at the moment. So this is about present moment awareness without judgment. So present moment awareness is being here now with awareness. So this is being aware of what your thoughts are. It's being aware of what your emotions are, what's going on in your body, but as well what's going on around you, but without judgment. So in mindfulness practice, often there's a lot of different types of practice, but quite a few practices will focus on watching your thoughts, for example. Often when we experience thoughts, we'll hook onto them. They will then dominate our present moment experience. But in mindfulness, we learn to just observe them non-judgmentally and just let them evolve. And then they change, they go away. So if you think of like walking into this room, I might have noticed the lights.
It's a fair few of them.
But then I just move on. Right? But when we notice something that is distressing, and that distressing thing could be like a thought, we notice that, we grab onto it. We don't just then move on to the next thing. We grab onto it, and that's all we're thinking about, and we miss out on what's going on in front of us. So mindfulness is about just noticing all of those experiences without judging ourselves, right? So without the, I shouldn't be thinking about this, or why can't I let this go? Like notice that. And
let it move on. So it's fair to say that like no one ever really goes into, but majority of people wouldn't really go in with a clear mind. It's just observing them and learning to sort of disassociate from everything that's going on in there.
Yeah, so learning to just notice, and I guess that provides distance from our thoughts as well. It's really hard. Mindfulness practice is really hard. A lot of people really struggle with it. It takes a long time to get used to. It requires a lot of practice. You're retraining your brain, right?
It's wild when you think about it like that,
It requires practice. So it's tricky because our brain is there to problem solve, and so when we experience something that's distressing, such as a thought, we grab onto it to solve that problem. Even if it's a memory of a past event, we grab onto it to figure out what went wrong and how we can fix it for the future. But that can become problematic when that's all we're doing, and then we miss out on the present moment. So it's tricky. That's how our brain works. So we're retraining it to just notice and let go.
I find it challenging as well because for me, I love seeing progress. Like, so in the gym, if you start sweating or you feel exhausted, same with lifting weights and stuff like that, you know it's working. And for me, mindfulness, even though it's challenging me mentally, I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I'm literally sitting here.
Yeah. And the effects are really subtle. Right. So One will worry less, ruminate less over time, but there's not that clear.
Meditate and you're stoked.
Exactly. Yep. It takes a lot of time, a lot of practice. Yeah. That's
it's
how
that
it goes.
Is it Jocko Willink who says discipline equals freedom? And I guess mindfulness is one of those things where discipline is extremely important, and consistency, like to just show up, even if it's 2 to 3 minutes a day, just keep working on that. And I remember the first time Calm sucked me in with it has the streaks on it. Calm's a meditation app.
Yes.
And one of my mates did a year, so I was like, I'm doing a year. And it just wasn't even about meditation then. I think that's important as well. Like meditation, from what I understand, it can come through, for me, it's surfing, or I'm just being in almost like that flow state and being present more so than going, I need to get this like completely clear mind or whatever it is. And that whole year where I meditated for a year straight wasn't even about meditation. It became about the challenge of doing a year straight.
Right.
And when I got to the end of it, I was like, what a dickhead. You forgot the point. And I think, going back to that, it's important to be mindful of why you're doing what you're doing. And if mindfulness and rewiring your brain and understanding your thoughts take time to do that. What do you feel about, I guess, putting it down on paper? Do you feel that's beneficial, or is it more so mindfulness just sort of sitting there and thinking?
Well, mindfulness can look like a lot of different things. So it can be going for a bushwalk and tuning into what you can hear and really being present with what you can hear. Mindfulness can be engaging in artwork. Mindfulness can be of the breath, just watching the breath, noticing the breath. It can be of noticing thoughts. So it can look like a lot of different things. I think in terms of writing things down, journaling's great for different reasons. Like journaling can be a really nice way of making sense of our thoughts. It's not for everyone. Quite a few people who I recommend it to will come back and be like, nah, not for me, mate. But other people love it. So definitely worth trying. Definitely.
Yeah, there's so many cool tools. I want to talk about attachment styles in relationships. This is interesting, and it's not really something, I've read the 5 love languages, so I guess I learned about love languages, but then when I went down the rabbit hole of attachment styles, it's so fascinating.
It is
so fascinating. So what are the different types, and sort of how do we go through that process of implementing it into our relationships too? Because it's obviously beneficial to understand where you sort of sit on that, and obviously for your partner as well.
Yeah, so we all generally fit into a certain attachment style. There are 3 main attachment styles, and then some kind of other attachment styles that less of the population fit into. So we have securely attached people, anxiously attached people, and avoidantly attached people. All of them are adaptive in their own way. And generally these attachment styles develop from pretty much birth. And are based on a number of things. We're all born with a particular temperament based on the way our parents are with us, the way we interact. So it's not something we can just predict generally. I mean, we can certainly look at someone's history and make sense of it. But there's a lot of factors that come into why we have a certain attachment style. So maybe I'll give you a brief kind of description of each of those ones. Cool. So based on the research, and there's decades of research on attachment style, we have securely attached people. So these people generally just expect that their emotional needs will be met, they deserve to be loved, and generally these people can just kind of see what other people need and respond intuitively.
So would that be like the gold standard, or let's say standard, but is that like what people are striving for, or?
Yeah. So
the gold standard. I was like, just pictured a gold star from primary school, and it's like.
So I think based on research, around half the population fit into this category.
Oh wow, yeah.
Which I also found quite surprising.
Yeah.
But that's,
The research,
I guess who's participating in the research as well is a good question to ask. So these people generally, find it quite easy to navigate relationships. Obviously, we all have difficulties in relationships, but generally they can kind of see what their partner needs and respond to it.
Yep.
Anxiously attached people generally will have more of an expectation that their partner will kind of like leave them or so they're more prone to feeling anxiety in a relationship.
Yeah. I felt that for a long time, and that was like my own behaviours sort of definitely led me to be that way, and it wasn't fun.
Yeah. For sure. So there's generally an expectation that the other person will leave them or not want them. So they'll try to, I guess, this can look like wanting to, plan things to kind of feel a little bit more secure in that relationship, or to work towards those milestones a little bit quicker.
Yep. And would that be linked to like low self-esteem or self-worth as well, potentially?
Potentially. It's quite complicated.
Yep.
So, usually it's linked to certain beliefs we have about ourselves. But generally these people will tend towards feeling quite anxious in those relationships, and the kind of self-talk that might go along with that could look like low self-esteem or low kind of self-worth.
So someone in, I guess, who sort of is resonating with what you're saying there. So how do you sort of look to start progressing through that? Like obviously seeing a psychologist, and is there any other like at home sort of tools and tricks that?
Attachment styles are quite stable across the lifespan. It takes a long time to actually change an attachment style. Right. So we're looking at like years of therapy, or actually being in a relationship with a securely attached person can move someone.
The environment, okay.
Yeah. So I guess awareness is the first thing. Again, coming back to reflecting and identifying your own thoughts. So if you're expecting, if you're dating someone and you haven't had a response from their text message for a while, and you're kind of jumping to they're not interested in me anymore, or what did I do? What did I say? Running through scenarios in your mind. I guess taking pause and thinking about what you're thinking, how you're feeling. Is this based on the actual situation, or am I feeling an anxiety because I'm prone to feeling that anxiety? But at the same time, everyone has their needs. So someone with a more anxious attachment style, learning what your needs are. Maybe you need a little bit more verbal reassurance from your partner. Maybe, it's really important for you to have them respond in a consistent way. Yep. And that's okay. Communicate that. Yep. Right?
It's growing the relationship.
Yes. So that's an anxious attachment style.
Sorry, another quick question. Yeah. How would someone who's dating, or is their partner may be in that anxious style, are there any sort of things that I guess you can communicate to get them to sort of start looking at maybe what their wants are or their needs are as well?
Yeah, so someone with an anxiously attached person, providing reassurance is really important.
Yep.
So being able to identify, I'm sorry I didn't respond to you for X amount of time. Like, I can see that that's made you feel quite anxious. What can I do in future to help make you feel more secure in this relationship?
Yeah. That's cool. I like that. And the last attachment style?
Avoidantly attached people. So these people, I guess, they sit into that kind of lone wolf kind of category a little bit more. So having someone need them can feel uncomfortable. And when they feel that attachment start to form, these people typically pull away a little bit. They can start to think about past relationships as an ideal, or they might have a bit of the grass is greener kind of perspective. And sometimes they can pick out little flaws in their partner as well, which makes them pull away from people. So I guess the avoidantly attached person will default towards pulling away, as opposed to the anxiously attached person who will default towards coming towards.
Yeah, gotcha.
So they're a little bit more opposing. So an avoidantly attached person still craves an attachment to someone else. They want that attachment. It's just really hard.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's harder
It's
for
like
them.
a magnet, just trying to put magnets together. And
Yeah. So I guess these people want a little bit more space. They may come across as quite aloof at times. A big portion of the dating pool is avoidantly attached people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So for all those people out there, like, what's that? How do they work through that? Obviously, is it a similar sort of process to work through that years of therapy and work as well?
Yeah. So with an avoidantly attached person, it can be important to do things like reflect on what you're grateful for in your relationship, so that you're not kind of focusing on what's giving you the ick or, comparing to other people. So really focus on what you're grateful for in the relationship. Again, communication is key. So if an avoidantly attached person is with someone and they, having their own space is really important to them, communicating that to someone. So I'm going to go and spend some time by myself. It's nothing about us. I just need some space for myself to rest and recharge. You're probably not going to hear from me for this amount of time.
See ya. Yeah.
Bye. So communication is really important.
Yeah. Second thing that's really, two things that are popping up is the reflection and the communication are definitely important things to develop and work on, that's for sure. Is there any, for those people obviously seeking out therapy and working on those things, is there any way that people can, is there like quizzes that people can take to, I guess, get a rough idea of potentially what attachment style, or do they need to see professional help for that? Or
oh, look, there's a few different, if you see a therapist, they'll work through that with you. What's coming to mind, there's a really great book on attachment styles, which is amazing for just general public. I actually brought it with me today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. It's called Attached.
I literally got it up on my bookshelf up there.
Yeah,
I haven't read it yet.
Read it. It's so good.
Those ones are there and my next ones to read.
Yeah. So Amir Levine, Rachel Heller. Super digestible information. Talks about the three kind of main attachment styles in detail in terms of what it looks like. There's a couple of quizzes in there, and disclosure, I'm not getting money from promoting this or anything like that. It's just a book that I think is really great.
Great resource.
So it has quizzes in there to help you identify your attachment style and help you identify other people's attachment styles based on their behavior. So there's certainly,
so funny. That's awesome.
There's certainly quizzes out there. I can't think off the top of my head any specific ones.
Get that book. And we'll get
book.
A clip. No. But there's definitely so many, and this is the other amazing thing now with YouTube and books and stuff like that. There's experts who've been studying things for decades who've put all their hard work into a book that you can buy for $15.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing. It's just making the time to do that.
Yeah. And that one, I listened to it on Audible.
Oh, cool.
And it's super listener friendly. The narrator is great.
There's some of those ones where you're like, oh my God, this is terrible. Yeah.
No, that's a good one. So I do recommend that book. Attachment styles is something that's really good to be aware of in relationships. It can help navigate your partner's behavior if you're noticing things that might be based on their attachment style, and then you can just navigate it together because, you know, all the attachment styles, they serve a function, and the anxiously attached person is often incredibly sensitive to people's emotion and can pick up on emotional cues really easily, and that's such a beautiful quality. And then the avoidantly attached person can, you know, go out and spend all this time alone and do all these like really cool things by themselves. Usually, like a lot of people that you know, are kind of idealized, often the avoidantly attached, like lone ranger type person. So they all are great in their own way. But can also be tricky in their own way too.
Yeah, so it's just another thing that we need to learn on. Because I look at relationships in regard, like I guess in phases of the first one being that honeymoon phase, which everyone's just absolutely froths on the honeymoon phase, and then phase 2 where we start focusing. You sort of mentioned there where you see something and you grab it and focus on it, which may not be something that you enjoy about your current partner, and that's when relationships can turn sour, or you become complacent and you stop focusing on the amazing things that were there at the beginning. And once again, everyone's different. Like there are some things that you need to be aware of and go, fuck, we need to sort this out. And there's, you know, people who just go, all right, well, this is it for me. I'll just stay in this relationship, which I'm not happy in, but I also don't want to leave. And then we also have the opportunity to leave, or the ones who work through it by learning about these things and going, hey, we need to have some conversations, which can be challenging, and it can be vulnerable as well, where we have to go, look, this is what I want, this is what I need, this might be bugging me about you at the moment, and it's not personal, it's for the betterment of our relationship.
Yes.
And I think that's an important thing for everyone really to start taking ownership. If you want those relationships that most of us dream about having, it's like put the fucking work in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are complex. You know, not only are we as individuals complex, your partner's complex as well. So you've got two complex people coming together. So the more you both work on that awareness and reflection and communicate that, it's going to set yourself up for a great relationship.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key things there is you both need to work on it, right? So if one person is aware of all these things and trying to communicate and being responsive to their partner's needs, it's important that both people are doing that. Otherwise one can feel unappreciated, unfulfilled, and so it's a two-way street.
Is there any sort of tips to motivate your partner if they're not? Because that is something as well, especially in our academy, where there's a lot of men who are obviously taking that step to get in, I guess, a personal development and be better. And sometimes they say, oh, my partner's just not interested in it. And they're often very excited about what they're learning and wanting to try these exercises and improve their relationship. And it's just like talking to a wall.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
I guess including your partner in things. So, hey, like I learned about this thing. Do you want to listen to this podcast episode with me in the car? Or, hey, do you want to do this exercise together? Like it would mean a lot to me if you do this with me. Or, hey, do you want to read this article that I came across? I'd really love to hear what you think about that. So including the other person. And hopefully through that experience, they have a little bit of motivation sparked to be like, tell me more about this. But again, there's only so much we can do, right? If someone's just unwilling to participate, then that's where they're at in their journey. Yeah,
and sort of got to deal with that as it pops up.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I've got so much out of here, and there's so much more I want to look into. And it's funny that you brought that book because it's literally been on my bookshelf. I bought it just before I went away, and I was like, that's what I'm going to read. But then I've had different books come through, so I'm just trying to get through. There's so much to learn and read, but I'm excited to learn more about the attachment styles because I think it's something that I definitely need to understand. And you're extremely busy as well, so I really do appreciate your time, and it's exciting to know that the work that you're doing, especially within our community at Brisbane, and unfortunately is so busy that there's a big wait list. It's good. It's a good and bad thing, and you're also managing your time. That was one thing that we were talking about before, was like how you look after yourself. And I guess to wrap it up, what would be a few good self-care tips that you have for yourself in the line of work that you are in, but also trying to stay happy and motivated throughout life?
Yeah, for me, again, connecting to my values is really important. So for me personally, getting out into nature is just so important.
Yep.
If I go out for a hike, I'm so recharged.
Yep.
So getting out to nature, exercise, eating, like all the things.
Yeah, all the things
that we
everyone,
know that we should do. But connecting with what matters for me is really getting out in nature. So I guess that's what works for most people, is connecting what matters to you to be able to recharge.
Yeah, awesome. And can people follow you? Are you on socials that people can follow, or nah, all good?
Sorry,
cool.
guys.
Everyone's like, oh. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Now, if you've made it this far, thanks so much for listening to the whole episode. I would truly appreciate it, whether you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you could take a quick minute to leave a review and even a 5-star rating if that's what you feel, and share it on the socials, because it helps us get these incredible episodes out into the ears of blokes and ladies who are going to get value from. Until Thursday, have a ripper week. Thank you for listening to the Man That Can Project podcast. My name is Lachie Stuart, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, please take a moment to rate and review the Man That Can Project on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our newest episodes. We'll see you again next time.